Hope that you're ready for some science and some graphs as well. But let me start the talk by presenting the question. Can you objectively measure the quality of music? That's the question that me and my team set out to answer because we thought if we can objectively measure the consumer's perceived quality of music, could we then predict the marketability of that song, or could we predict the likelihood that that song can take the artist's career to the next level, be monetized, so on and so forth? So the answer is yes, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. But before I do so, let me tell you a little bit about the industry and why we thought that it might have been useful to tackle this problem. So Spotify put out a report in 2021. As of February 2021, there was 7 million creators on Spotify, and about 60,000 songs per day were being uploaded to Spotify every single day to be distributed. Spotify projects that in 2025, there's going to be about 50 million creators on the platform and about 375,000 songs being uploaded and distributed every single day. Some of that is going to be podcasts, but majority is going to be artists. Out of that data, it turns out that 90% of all the monetized streams that happen on Spotify as of February 2021 were attributed to 57,000 artists. So if you compare that to the 7 million creators, 57,000 is less than 1%, right? So there's a problem with how artists, get into the music industry and how they can figure out how to get their career to the next level. There's also another survey that I want to point out. Business Insider did a study or a survey in 2017 that interviewed or surveyed 152,000 students, all high school students, and they asked them what they wanted to be when they, grow up, or their occupation. They gave them 209 different occupations to choose between. These were the top 9. So if you look at the order, we got photographer, vet, actor, surgeon, athletic trainer, musician or singer, artist, professional athlete, nurse. At least 4 of those, photographer, actor, musician or singer, or artist, are already some type of an artist. I would also throw the professional athlete in the mix because if you look at the bucket of entertainment, they're all entertainers in a way. But it just shows that going on in the future, there's going to be a high demand for this profession. There's other studies you can Google that sort of also suggest a similar thing, that almost 50% of high school students, when they're asked the same question, they'll want to be some sort of a YouTuber, singer, DJ, rapper, influencer, something along those lines. Now, this is for the U.S. This does not represent the world, but this is what the industry is like today. So we thought that maybe we can help that, because a lot of artists, of course, would love to be able to have a successful career in music, monetize it, feed themselves, their families, and so on and so forth. So before we figured out how to solve this issue or help with this problem, we looked at other businesses and how they conduct business. A lot of startups, especially led by experienced entrepreneurs or savvy entrepreneurs, always put out a minimal viable product first. They sort of test it in front of the consumer. They try to get some validation from the consumer. And then once they have it, then they're willing to invest millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars into producing that product on the mass scale, to distribute it, so on and so forth, put it into the marketplace essentially. And not only that, big companies that you guys may be familiar with, like Apple and Tesla, do the same thing. Whenever they want to introduce a new product to the marketplace, they sort of go through this feasibility study phase where they put out a minimal viable product, test it with like a beta testing group first, make sure that it's going to have some rate of success once they put it out on a massive scale, so on and so forth. And it's a common practice amongst all the successful companies you can think of. So why shouldn't the artist or the producer, the aspiring artist or producer, sort of operate in a similar fashion or use a similar methodology? I think they should. Why not? It's available, especially today. So we're going to show you how we were able to do a similar thing on a micro scale. And I'm going to show you how we sort of set up this experiment, right? If you guys like science or study science in college, the scientific method will tell you got to sort of isolate your variables and your constant. So in this case, the song is the constant, and we like to use a visual snippet, like a 45-second to a minute long video. It doesn't have to be the official music video, but we like to see the artist, perform the song, sing it, rap it, or if it's a producer making some sort of a musical piece, and we want to see their face doing it on the visual aspect. So that's the constant. The variables fall into two buckets. We have the audiences that represent different audience groups, and then we have the individual variations of that one video, which we sort of use different psychological triggers to get a response out of those ads. And I'm going to start first with talking about the different groups, because we always want to have at least one broad group. So let's say we're marketing an R&B song to determine its sort of quality. The broad group would represent the genres of R&B. So on Facebook and Instagram, for example, on their ad platforms, you can target by like 90s R&B, contemporary R&B, rhythm and blues, soul, things like that. Then we also always want to have specific groups. The specific groups can target consumers that listen to similar artists that are out there on the major level, that sound close to or in a similar niche or style of music that the artist is also in, that we're marketing, right? So we can, for example, put a list together of similar female artists in that same style of music. We can do the same thing for male artists that are out there as major artists that are similar. And then the fourth group, we sometimes like to use a lookalike audience or a combination audience. Let me explain that a little bit. Lookalike audience is when an artist that we're marketing already has a decent amount of fan base, and we can tell Facebook and Instagram ad platform to look at all the real fans that have been engaging with them for some time, and let's look for millions more that meet the similar characteristics out on the internet to sort of target. The custom ones is very interesting. We can combine, let's say, similar artists with the specific interest of the vibe or the feeling that the song is given out there. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the psychological triggers are powerful, because if you study psychology, you will understand that all of us humans, we respond to certain emotions or psychological triggers. Those can be anxiety, anger, scarcity, social currency, the feeling of happiness or empowerment. So we like to add different questions or copy to the music ad to sort of invoke those emotions. For example, if you have a song about relationships and you want to sort of tap into some anxiety or anger, you can say, in your last relationship, how much time have you wasted of your life, right? And then the song plays and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting how we can play around with those different social triggers. There's also other things that psychology teaches us, like most of us as humans, we like to avert negative feelings. So the aversion, most of us would rather not lose $5 than to gain $5. So there's so many different behaviors that we can play around with to come up with some, common ones that we use over and over again to get data back that will allow us to start putting together some parameters to measure this, score of quality. And I want to give you a specific example of an ad, because in psychology, we also know that the feelings of sadness stifle sharing, or they definitely don't promote people to take action, right? We found that to be true. We literally measured that, but we also found something interesting, that when songs are sort of sad, they also increase the personal consumption of that song. So I'll give you a specific example. We had an artist that did a song about losing a loved one. It was like their right-hand man, their business partner, their cousin, and they did a song about how they dealt with that loss. And we targeted consumers that liked similar artists to the artists we're marketing, but we also mixed it together with people that were interested in grievance groups or therapy sessions or how to deal with the loss of a loved one on the internet. And the data that came back with the engagement was very surprising. Again, we did prove that the sharing or the ability to share that song was much lower than we would like, but the personal consumption, the fact that the consumers that saw that song, the rate at which they added it to their Spotify playlist or their YouTube playlist was incredible. So that's an example of combining those different characteristics. So as we are, marketing these songs, once we start getting some data in the initial stage, we'll shut down the ads or the variations that are not performing well. You see those in the red, sometimes the entire ad group. And then the ones that are in the bright green, those are the ones that we sort of leave on and scale to get more data, because there's a certain amount of data that you have to be able to get. I'm going to cover that in a second. If you go to the next slide, we can do this on, you could do 10 songs at a time if the budget is there. and available. But what we're sort of measuring, if you go to the next slide, is certain things on these platforms, right? And on Facebook and Instagram, we're looking at views divided by impressions, cost per clicks, click-through rates, the comments, shares, saves, the ability to convert the consumer to, once they see the song, to actually follow that artist on their individual social media platforms. And what me and my team had to kind of figure out is how much weight are we going to give to some of these metrics? Because you have to ask yourself in certain situations, is the fact that somebody's willing to share a song more useful in our measurement than the fact that they save it, right? And it turns out that a lot of times when consumers save an ad, they may be out of time. You know, they got captured by the few first seconds. They wanted to see it later, so they save it. But the ability to share it is definitely one of the measurements that holds a lot of weight in us to be able to determine the quality of the song. Comments are a very simple way of analyzing the results. People will literally tell you how they feel about the song, right? And again, followers, shares. So I don't want to bore you with the details, but once we're able to sort of run these tests on Facebook and YouTube, and the reason we do Facebook and YouTube, Facebook of course encompasses Instagram, is because those are the two largest platforms on this planet that have the most consumer data. The next, we go to phase 2, right? Because there's always a little bit of a chance that perhaps the visual component of the song or our clever ability to play around with these different social triggers sort of skewed the data in terms of how consumers will, engage with it. So if you go to the next slide, our phase 2 is to then run ads that will take consumers out of these social media platforms into platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, because this is where they engage with just the audio portion. Because at the end of the day, we're just trying to measure the song's quality, the sonic quality. Of course, the video can affect certain things. So on Spotify, for example, some of the measurements or parameters that we're really looking at that, again, give some weight to us being able to measure this quality is the save rate and the listener to stream ratio. For example, you can have one listener that listens to the song 6 to 10 times over the period of the ad. That's a great ratio. Save rate, how often do users that go from Instagram to Spotify to listen to the song then actually save it to one of their favorite playlists? Because if you save it to a playlist, that means you're going to consume it, over and over again, most likely. So being able to sort of do this gives us the score of quality. Now, we don't have just one number to it. If you were to ask me, what is the score that determines the quality of a song? If you go to the next slide, it's everything in yellow. If the ad or the song across our tests can be better than those numbers for those particular parameters, we know that's a song that the artist or the label should focus on. They can scale it, has a way higher chance of being able to monetize the artist's brand, and a lot of other strategies I'm going to talk about next. So once we are able to measure what song is the best by sort of measuring the perceived quality by the consumer, if you go to the next slide, what is next for that artist? If you continue to market the songs in a similar fashion, and not just digitally, but on the ground as well, handing out flyers or just getting in front of real human beings outside one way or another and performing that song or performing your craft as a musician, you do that for a number of months, you're then able to go back and retarget all the people that have engaged with you, and then perhaps you can invite them to an event or a concert, a live performance, and they can buy tickets online. As an example, they'll buy merch there, which helps the artists, of course, monetize their brand and their music. Hey, we can do that simply just online. If we do this correctly for a long period of time, we can literally have the artist create merchandise based around the theme of that song or the vibe of the song, and then we can try to use those different parameters to, again, target buy, to convert those fans to buying their merchandise on Shopify. One exciting thing I want to tell you about, because this is where technology is heading, is that we're going to be teaming up with a company called GrooveUp. GrooveUp is a company that's going to enable artists to create NFT tokens of their songs. And to give you a 30,000-foot summary of this, that's going to basically enable them to create a stock of their song. So what they're going to be able to do is sell shares of that song to their fans potentially. Let's say they sell 30% shares of their song for $10,000. Essentially, they're raising $10,000. They'll be able to use that money to market their song further, as an example. And because these NFTs are going to integrate with and monitor the performance of streaming across Spotify, Apple Music, and these different digital streaming platforms, is going to add value to that NFT, and the value is going to grow. So essentially, the fans will benefit from that growth, and so will the artists. And this is where the future is going. Eventually, the fans may be the record labels, at least from a financial standpoint, of the artists, and the artists will have a lot more control to be able to market their songs, determine what they're going to do. And I know some of you may ask, well, is this going to ruin the artistic form of the song? I don't think it is, because the more you empower the artist to do what they like and they figure out how to measure it, the more they can provide the consumer what they want to hear as well. And of course, there's so many songs out there, the consumer already can pick and choose whatever they like. So I think it's an interesting time ahead of us, but this is where things are going, and this is what we have found through some of the work that we have been doing. So I hope that wasn't too heavy on data and psychology, but it's exciting to me, it's exciting to us, and I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation.